Okay, Chair, the meeting is now live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to all of you yet again, and sorry for my slight technical problem. We've got apologies from Councillor Robinson, and I think Councillor Johnston's also sent an email to say that he is going to have to leave at a certain time, so he may not be here for the whole time, depending on how we progress the actual meeting. He's got work to do in the NHS, so it's fine. The next thing to look at is the declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No, well, let's go on from there then. There are no urgent items of business. And then the next thing is the minutes of the previous meeting, which I have to say that I was only in for part of that meeting. The vice chair was in charge for most of it, although I did contribute. I don't know anything you want to say about this, Councillor O'Neill. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, that's the minutes fine.
So I think what happened there, I was muted on my phone as well, unfortunately. I hope you got that lot. Councillor O'Neill, is there anything you want to add about the minutes?
Well, just one thing that crops up. The thing what we recommended for I forgot what the mobility, shop mobility. And we recommended that they drop that saving. And that's all it said, but for some reason it crossed over into my other role as township chair. Anyway, I've since learned that it is our recommendation has been adhered to, so it doesn't involve the townships. But there was a bit of a conversation, but I think a bit of a confusion of what roles we have. You know, I was vice chair of O&S, but suddenly I'm chair of township, which I am, but tis a separate meeting, so I don't see how one decision can lead to a request for funding for something that we've decided to make a recommendation to cabinet. Just a point I want to make.
Thanks for that clarification.
I don't see. You probably wouldn't have had it because it came out initially to me about funding it through the townships, which I don't recall. You know, it was just this crossing over. It just happened to be the same person. Yeah. If you see what I mean.
Yes,
anyway,
I do.
It has been adhered to, I think. Well, it has.
Okay, that's fine. Is there any other comments anybody else wants to make on the minutes?
Councillor Holly, can I just add on Councillor O'Neill's about the shop mobility that the minutes of O&S Committee have been reflected in the papers for Cabinet that are planned for Thursday?
Yes, I'm aware of that. And it is in there. So that's fine. We'll come back to that anyway on the actual savings in terms of a bit of further clarification, perhaps. So if there are no more observations to be made on the minutes, can we approve them as a true record of the meeting?
Approved, Chair.
Great, thank you. The next thing is the Corporate Overview and Strictly Work Committee programme. Obviously, we've only got one final item to come this year. I know, again, going back to the minutes, that there was an item that we talked about there, which I think Councillor Rourke raised with regards to some executive payments or remuneration. And as to whether or not a report needs to be brought forward to this committee, that will need to be done, but probably not at the next meeting because it's a pretty full agenda. It probably will be taken over into the new year. So, any other points on the scrutiny programme? In that case, we can.
Chair,
yes,
just a point for me. Councillor Rourke raised an issue about bins and charging for bins. So there'll be a report coming back on that following his request at the March meeting. And also it's referenced about an update on the ICT strategy. That will actually be the digital or the draft digital strategy. And it'll be a presentation upon that.
Oh, okay, that's fine. If you could add those things, to that, and I won't have any no objection to that. So we can just pick that up with the vice chair and with Peter Thompson in terms of the actual detailed planning to get that sorted out before the next meeting. So on we go from there. Then the next thing then obviously is into the main body of the reports, and that's in terms of the budget reports. And the first report that we've got is report number 6, which is the Local Government Act 2003, which I presume that Julie Murphy will be presenting together with Sam.
Yeah. Julie's on mute.
Sorry, thanks, Councillor Holly. Sorry, I was on mute. Sam's presenting tonight, so yeah, over to Sam.
Okay.
So the first paper, which is the Local Government Act paper, it's a paper for council from the Chief Finance Officer, which notes their opinion on the robustness of the budget and the level of general balances and reserves that the council hold. So in the paper, council is asked to consider the budget approach to the setting of the budget and our level of general balances, and the report recommends that balances remain at 17 million again, which is the same as last year. But if you look in Appendix 2, we have reallocated risk of those balances. So the actual there will be changes that if our position changes, we would use the balances for different circumstances than previously. And then the rest of the body of the report details the key assumptions that have been input into the budget, and how then those flow forward into future reports. And that as Julie's role as Chief Finance Officer is reporting that it is a robust budget.
Any questions? I've got a few. Are there no questions? Can you actually hear me? You can. Okay.
Yeah,
fine,
I can
sorry.
hear you, mate.
It just I got no response to the question, so I was making the incorrect assumption that there were items that people wanted to raise, but I didn't hear it. Can I ask you a general question about the balances? And what we've got here is first of all, that there was an audit report that's been done by, I presume, our external auditors, which looks at the resilience of the council, and the conclusion is that our balances are prudent, which is what I would obviously expect them to be. But also, I think that looking at, if you like, the overall picture of the balances, and given, if you like, where we were probably about 9 months ago, probably even 6 months ago, until we got all this extra government funding, which has put us in a pretty strong position now. And if you look at the not just the balances, but you also look at the earmarked reserves carried forward, we are in a very good position in my, if you like, interpretation. What's your professional judgment as to, if you like, on the sort of spectrum of prudence? Where do you think we are? I mean, obviously there's uncertainty going forward. I accept that, but at least one of the biggest uncertainties has virtually gone in terms of the collection fund, with the 20 odd million pounds that we've got in terms of additional grants from the government. So what's your take on the balance sheet overall?
I'll take the question. Thanks, Councillor Holly. The certainties is still short term. We still haven't got the long term certainty because we have no understanding of our long term funding from the government. And also, even though the collection fund deficit has 75% of that's been met by the government under irrecoverable losses, we still don't understand the impact on the collection rates for business rates and council tax long term, and whether any funding will continue from the government for any shortfalls that we'll experience. So there's still a lot of unknowns really, and I think those levels of balances and reserves allow us to have some certainty about the long-term viability of the council while we get certainty around those unknowns. And also COVID, we don't understand the long-term impact on services. The likelihood is the demand for adult care and children's services will grow. There's a likelihood that some of our income streams for an economy may start to reduce as unemployment starts to increase. So at the moment, I'm comfortable that the balances we've got are at the right level while we understand the future a little bit clearer.
Okay, I mean that I have to say is the answer I would expect. Obviously, all accountants put my accountant's hat on rather than my councillor hat, and we like to have as prudent as balance sheets as possible. I mean, I have to say I'm delighted in many ways. I mean, I accept there are uncertainties, unknown unknowns down the road, but given, if you like, where we were not that long ago, and also given where many other councillors are, we're actually, in my judgment, in a pretty good position, which I think is what you're saying. But you clearly don't want to, if you like, reduce, if you like, the buffer that you've got to try and manage up, future unexpected events or unknowns.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. At the moment, it would be the wrong time to reduce those balances until we've got more certainty around the issues that I described.
Yeah, okay, well, we will come back to that later on anyway. So, I mean, that's the first point that I had. And what else was there? No, the rest of it comes in the actual detailed report, actually. Okay. So do you want to move on from there? Then so we've that gives us the overview. In terms of the presentation, are you going to go through and talk about the revenue budgets and the obviously council tax? Talk about if you like, the capital budget. That's the way you're going to play it, so we can come back on specific questions. I've got a couple as an example on capital in due course. Okay, that's fine. So back to you, Sam.
Okay. Yeah, so the next report is the detail of the budget and the medium-term financial strategy, which is the main appendix which to it. So in this report, Cabinet on Thursday will be asked to consider and recommend the budget to Council for the proposed revenue budget, which is outlined in Appendix 1, and that is a main requirement of £235.9 million for 21-22. We're also asked, Cabinet are asking to recommend to Budget Council a council tax for Band D purposes of £1,727, which is a 4.99% increase. And then as a council tax, including precepts, that would be £2,036.62, which is a 4.74% increase for Band D properties. Cabinet are also being asked to note the position in relation to the Education Services Grant and Schools funding, which will come later and is also delegated through to the Director and Schools Forum. Cabinet are also asked to note that the recommendation that was approved at Cabinet in the 1st of December to earmark £500,000 of one-off funds in contingency for any additional demand in adult social care. So that would be on top of the reserves balances that we've already said would earmarked for contingency. Cabinet are also asked to note that any final balances from the 2021 financial accounts are transferred to the equalisation reserve for additional support to any future unknowns. Cabinet will also be asked to recommend and consider to Budget Council the budget carry forward policy, which is in Appendix 3, and that again is for specific carry forwards for reserves. They will also be asked to note and consider and then recommend the proposed 5-year capital programme, which is in Appendix 4 to the report. And I'll talk a little bit later, a bit more of the detail of the capital programme. The Cabinet are also asked that the Chief Financial Officer be given delegated authority to finalise the 21-22 discretionary business rates relief policy, and that is because the details will not be announced until the 3rd of March in the general budget, so we are asking for that delegation. That has also been done in previous years. Cabinet are also being asked to improve the new spending proposals that might be required in exceptional circumstances for revenue and capital to be noted through the budget and policy framework. The Appendix 6, which is the updated medium-term financial strategy, is asked to be considered and recommended to Council, and then also the pay policy, which is our annual statement that will be taken to Budget Council and then noted on the 31st of March. That's Appendix 5 of your report. And then the main key assumptions in the MTFS, which is Appendix 6, I've already mentioned the council tax being a 4.99% increase, and that's split between a 1.99% general increase for the council and the 3% at adult social care, which was announced in the spending review in November. We've also assumed the pay freeze, as was detailed in the spending review, except for lower paid staff, which we are still awaiting for some final details. All existing social care grants have been carried forward, plus the additional 1.2 million for 21-22 that was announced in the spending review. We've got the inclusion of the additional lower tier services grant from the last spending review of 0.4 million. We've included the additional one-off grant for COVID for 21-22 of 7.6 million, and we've included that as a post COVID reconciliation, and then also the local council tax support funding that we got in the last spending review of 3.2 million as a post-COVID pressure. You've mentioned, Councillor Hollett, about the 75% compensation for 2021 council tax business rate relief for the collection fund. We've carried that forward, with then the remainder of the deficit being spread over 3 years, so the impact is not just being felt in 21-22. The MTFS also assumes that there will be no airport dividend until 25-26, and we will continue to monitor that. The reserves some of our reserves will be smoothed for those airport losses starting from 22-23 going forward until we expect to receive the dividend in 25-26. And then there are some key pressures that we've continued to fund, and those are adult social care growth and the impact of the national living wage, the children's strategy that was agreed in October 2019, and some Rochdale Riverside revenue shortfall funding, which is based on the current financial model, and that's 750,000 per annum. Also in the MTFS is some high level details of the capital programme, which is now extended over a 5-year period, whereas previously we've set the programme for 3 years. This is to give some additional financial stability and known costs for borrowing and our capital outlay, and fits in with the SITFA guidance. As you can see there, we do have still quite an ambitious programme that's focused on regeneration of the borough, with the spend in 21-22 being set at 127.4 million, and then some reductions going forward in 22-23 down to 51.8 million, and 23-24 with 57.9 million, and then further reductions, so that the current programme shows that 25-26 will be a smaller programme of 21.8 million. But as in previous years, we will continue to review that, and rephasing can occur. I'll just stop there for any questions.
All right. Are there any questions? Again, I've got a couple of questions to ask.
Chair Councillor O'Rourke's indicating he'd like to ask a question.
Yes, by all means, Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you, Chair. Just, if you don't mind, can I just turn to children's spend? Obviously, last week we had a quite damning report on a particular children's home in the borough. Could you perhaps outline verbally, you know, what action the council can take within the proposed budget to sort of make sure that extra funds are available for children's social care, considering, you know, this is something I raised a year and a half ago, just to make sure that it was well funded, to make sure that these problems didn't occur. Problems makes it sound better than it is. It's worse than a problem. Can you outline within the budget what flexibility there is there to make sure that extra spend is possible?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Rock.
Can I just add to that, actually? The figures in our overall for children's services are coming down from this year into next year. And if we recall over the last 3 or 4 years, the one budget service which is overspent and overspent and overspent, it's been children's services. And as an O&S Committee, we've been very supportive. I mean, as we have to be. It's such an important part of our services and of our responsibilities. So the added point to Councillor O'Rourke's very valid question is: are you happy from your challenge of the budgets that we're not going to have a similar situation to what we've had last year and the year before in terms of overspend? I know it's got back this year, this last year, but in previous years with the reduction. And I know I don't want to go over old ground, because I had a really good briefing session from Gail Hopper about 9 months to a year ago, explaining the whole strategy, which really makes sense. But given, if you like, Councillor O'Rourke's important question, and just the fact that the actual absolute level of the budget is going down, are we happy that we have given sufficient resources to children's services to discharge their obligations in the way in which we would expect as councillors?
Okay, Chair, thank you. I'll just address Councillor O'Rourke's question first. We did develop, I think Sam made reference in a presentation, that a 5-year strategy with children's, and the next budget year is the 3rd year into that strategy. That strategy provides for an additional 6.8 million in that budget for children's, of which 2.8 of it will leave in recurrently, and the other amount will be phased out gradually during that 5-year strategy. So by year 5 we'll be down to 4.5 million, and year 6 it'll just remain at the 2.8 million. So the resources have been provided. We meet regularly with the service director and the assistant director who holds responsibility for children's to talk about that strategy and progress within that strategy. To address additional demands with Councillor Holly's question, is that there is a proposal that we set up a reserve in the budget for demand-led services and for economy. So we don't know if children's services pressures will start to increase next year, but we have provided some money within a reserve if that is the outcome.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Thanks, Chair. So just to clarify, have there been any conversations since last week? Because I think all of us on this council want to make sure that children's services are adequately funded. Obviously, that was quite a damning report last week. Have there been any conversations since to make sure that extra resources are going to children's services on top of what was already planned? Because I'm assuming the contents of that report were not planned. Clearly not. Therefore, extra resources are going to be needed since that report and to address those concerns. I think we need to make it very, very clear to the public out there that we are taking urgent action and make sure the resources are there to back it.
My understanding, if I can answer, Chair, Councillor O'Rourke, if there were some emergency meetings last week held, I spoke to Julia, and at the moment I'm not aware of any requests for additional resources, but if there is a request of such, of course, that would have to be funded to get us to the place we need to be. But I understand there has been meetings, and I don't know the detail of those to share.
I mean, I have to say that this is a good example of the fact that we have got a prudent balance sheet. That we do need to do more there. We can do more, and that's absolutely right. Actually, it's I'm sure as councillors will get opportunity to speak further on the operations side of things in due course. Are there any more questions? Councillor Rourke.
Sorry, final one from me. More of a helping me understand something question. So, and forgive me, Chair, I'm going to use an example of a piece of casework to illustrate a broader point, if that's okay. I know we're not meant to bring up casework.
As I'm sure it's relevant, know what you're like. I will indulge you.
Thank you. So, unfortunately, I've been dealing with a piece of casework for the past year in adult care, and unfortunately, it's an issue about there's a disputed claim about whether a particular resident has incurred a debt from the council with regards to adult care spending and their personal care budget. We as councillors and the ward councillors feel this particular resident has not incurred those costs, and we're basically has been misled a bit by the council, accidentally, of course, but has basically incurred this debt accidentally. So it's our view, look, can we not wipe this debt, get this resident the adult care they need? However, I'm told that the finance department say you can't wipe this debt. It's something the council aren't allowed to do. Tough luck. And that sticks in the core a bit, because we as ward councils really want to help this guy out, and it's been going on for a year. Can finance advise what is the solution to problems like this? Because I'm sure we've all got residents who get themselves in problems like this. What is the finance department's position on helping residents in cases like this? Because clearly, rock and hard place, no good for anyone, and it means that people aren't getting the care they need. And when we're talking about millions in the budget, the thousands seem, and we're talking small amounts of thousands here and hundreds. It seems difficult for me to understand.
I mean, it is casework, but I think you can probably respond generically, to the actual principle, perhaps.
Thank you. We've got Stephen Blizzard on the call, so he might be able to add a bit more with his knowledge, but my understanding there will be a debt write-off policy, which will have its criteria, and there'll be hardship funds that can help support people in greatest need. But I don't know if Steve wants to add anything that's more specific.
Yeah, I think there are, I know this particular case Councillor O'Rourke is referring to, and one of the issues really is it's a debt to the person rather than a debt to the council. And I know that sounds quite technical, but it does matter. And I think we arranged and offered to meet you, Councillor O'Rourke, haven't we, to discuss the particular case?
The meeting, unfortunately.
Well, I don't think I did, but we're quite happy to rearrange it if you want to. I did contact you today, to offer to meet you again. But it's not the council debt. So there is an issue, and we did seek legal advice from finance colleagues, and we're not able to. But as Julie says, we have got a hardship policy, and we are willing to do what we can. But it's not the council's debt, and we can't write it off.
Can I be very clear, Chair? This, in adult care, people are given advice by the council, and if they're given bad advice, it may well be a debt on their person, but I think we as a council need to accept some liability if we give people bad advice. Now, Steve, you did cancel the meeting. I've got the email to show it. Okay.
Well,
I know you're busy. Hang on, Chair. Chair, can I finish?
Listen, I think we need to take this now offline. Actually, it's getting into specifics on casework, and it's not right to wash to put
Chair,
in
with respect, a year to help a resident is not good enough.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you, Councillor Rourke, but I just think it just needs to be done offline, not in a public meeting. Now, and I was happy for you to raise the generic points, and you've got a valid question to ask, and we need to be mindful of what our policies are, etc., and what can and can't be done.
Chair, can I have an answer to the generic question? What the residents do if they get bad advice?
So I think we will come back to that. That is actually casework. I'm sorry, that's casework.
Chair, are you telling me that other people don't get bad advice?
I'm sorry, Councillor Rourke, but I just think that we're getting into
answer for the officer to give.
Is that are you asking for my response, Councillor O'Rourke?
Yours or finances. What do we do if people are given bad advice?
Well, if there are remedies for people who are given bad advice, and that would be through the complaints procedure. But I would state, in my view and other people's view, that this person had not been given the wrong advice. They may not have taken the advice given, but that were not given the wrong advice. They were given the advice following the protocols of the council.
Right, at that we're cutting that off, and you're right to take this forward, Councillor Rourke, but we're not discussing this anymore in this particular meeting. It is really going into casework. So, are there any more questions, please? I've got one important question. It's actually for Councillor Wardle, in fact. If you like, around the country, various councils are looking at things differently in terms of whether there should be increase in council tax, freezing council tax, etc. Obviously, it's different councils of different situations, and I don't want to get into party politics, which we mustn't do over in scrutiny. But obviously, this is a political decision in terms of raising the council tax, and given the fact that we have got a strong balance sheet, and in fact, there's also 2.1 million of surplus so far this year that hasn't been taken into the equalisation reserve, which will be after the cabinet meeting. Could you share with me any thoughts you have as to why it's right to do not to freeze council tax, when I think some people have said this is the right thing? I accept, because given the government guidelines, the government has given you the opportunity to do that, and you're adhering to those actual guidelines. So any thoughts from from the holder of the portfolio would be just helpful. And I say, I'm stress, it's not party political. I just need to understand. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving me the chance to answer you. And it was a very hard decision to reach.
I'm sure.
By all members. It really was. And it was not taken lightly. I think one point that needs to be drawn out is the fact that we've got so many A and B band residents paying on council tax that we don't get the revenue that some much richer boroughs get from the same increases. If that, am I making myself clear? I'm not sure. But if we've only got people paying A and B band, the revenue that comes in is far, far lower than it would be if we'd got lots of multi-millionaires living on Savile Row places. And basically that's the position. I don't know if Julie wants to add any more to that.
Thanks, Councillor Wardle. And yeah, really just to add that the budget needs recurrent funding, Councillor Holly. So the reserves and balances are only one-off pots of money, and be it they can put a sticking plaster over gaps for a year, or available to invest in transformation programs. They're not the way to recurrently fund a budget going forward, because that would start those authorities who have used one-off funds for their budgets in the past are of those authorities now facing difficult decisions and potentially Section 114 notices.
Let me come back in there. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I would never, under normal circumstances, advocate using one-off items to kick down council tax. But we are in exceptional situations, and you can see that by all the borrowing that the Chancellor has done. And that's why I asked the question, because it is a political decision. I'm sure for Councillor Wardle, it's a very hard decision to make, because I think some people out there will be saying, well, you've seen the government doing their bit. Why aren't the council doing their bit by freezing for 1 year council tax? Even though I understand, of course, you will need to, that's a loss of income that you have every single year going forwards. So you don't do that lightly. But I'm interested, and it's a difficult dynamic, actually, I have to say, in terms of what you actually do, which is why I asked the question. Sorry, will you come back in there, were you?
It's been a perfect storm, hasn't it? We've lost out on the airport money that we've always had in the past for many, many years. We've had people not paying rents to the council, not paying council tax to the council. There's just all these things have added up. We've had to provide computers for children at home, and we did get some help with that, but it didn't cover the cost. Again, we've had to help with children's meals in school holidays, and it's just gone on and on and on. And to bring in a balanced budget, which we are required as a council by law to do, we found we had no option.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I phrased it in the way in which I did was particularly with the 2.1 million. We've had the 2.1, which is a one-off item. We've also had reserves sent back from the Combined Authority Waste Disposal, which you could use as a one-off item. So, I mean, I think where we're at as a council, I find our finances quite remarkable. Having all the problems that you've actually said, and you're quite right, and it is difficulties going forwards, and you've got to be sensible, and you've got to be prudent and get the balance right. But I just think that there was a possibility that for 1 year and 1 year only you could do that. And I'm not an imprudent accountant. I would hasten to add, actually, but it is difficult, and you have a difficult decision to make.
Very difficult.
Yeah. Councillor Johnson's question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. You've mentioned in your dialogue there that you felt the government has done its bit. Can I ask a question to the officers? When all the COVID-19 issues was going on and there was lots of finances being released by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, there were promises made that should any council actually have really enforced expenditure that threatened its budget, that the government in fact will make up the full money spent. Can you actually tell me, is that the case? Because it seems to me that if Councillor Holly is saying that the government's done its bit, that in fact, from the comments that I seem to be picking up from the local government association, is that there's still a massive deficit.
Yeah, if I take that question, so what has been made available, I was just checking, I think it's 4 authorities, is a capitalisation directive. So there was 4 authorities who were struggling to set a balanced budget due to the impact of COVID. One of those being Luton, because they, massively dependent on their airport dividend. So they've been given the ability to capitalise some revenue spend, and it's called a capitalisation directive. So there has been some intervention from the government to those who are most struggling.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, maybe I didn't make myself clear. The government said it would meet the full costs of local authority spend for COVID-19. Have they done that?
We don't really know the full cost yet, Councillor Johnson. For this current financial year, I would say yes. Yes, we've had enough grant to cover what we're experiencing in terms of costs connected to COVID. It's the long-term impact that causes me greater concern. So I would say it was a correct statement for this financial year. For next financial year, we don't know how long the pandemic will continue to impact on our finances and how much the government funding will continue. So I'm unsure for future years.
Thank you for that. Cheers.
Can I just come back in there, Councillor Johnson, just to say this? The reason why I phrased it the way I did is that because with all the problems we've had, we've actually made a surplus in the year we've just come out of. So, Julie makes a valid point going forward. You don't know what's going to happen. None of us have got a crystal ball, and I have to say, actually, the one thing I was concerned about coming forward to the last year, that we've been over the years a very prudent council, and I was concerned that we wouldn't get our fair share of money. We would have to use our reserves at first before we get money from whatever source we get it from, but our reserves have been preserved going forward, and I think that is so important as well, actually. So it's I think we're in as far as I can see, a good position, but I'm not resting my laurels for exactly the same reason that Julie is, because none of us have got a crystal ball into the future.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just make a comment that the reason why the council's resources are as they are is down to the skills of our officers, and not really looking at the support that's going to be given in the long term by this government.
Right. So we go on from here then. So are there any more questions on this part of the report? So Sam, back to you for the next part of the report.
Okay, thanks. The next part is the reserves policy. So this is a new paper that we have established for this going forward for this budget. So the paper will ask Cabinet to approve the policy in Appendix 1. The main part of the policy is required to demonstrate the Council's strategic approach to holding and setting reserves for the future resilience of the Council. So it leads on from Julie's statement in the Local Government Act paper and gives a framework for officers to use going forward for establishing reserves. It's just giving more of a framework than we've had previously, and also fits in with SITFA's financial management code requirements to have that statement there. So it will be a policy that's reviewed annually, brought to this forum and for Cabinet as part of the budget process each year.
Any questions? Again, best practice. So it makes sense doing it. So that's good. So the next thing we're going to, I think, are discretionary fees and charges. All these reports, I think we're noting, we're not making any recommendations specifically to Cabinet. We're making observations. So discretionary fees and charges. Okay.
Yeah. So this paper is a summary of what and notes the changes that we brought to the last meeting. So the paper will go forward to Cabinet and then ask them to take that to full council. So Cabinet will be asked to approve the 2% increase for general charges as noted in section 4.3, apart from the exemptions, those being car parking, taxi licence fees, land charges, liability charges, food hygiene, the care line and support at home, the town hall meeting rooms, bereavement services, bulky waste, sponsorship signs and car boot sales, and the detail of all charges are included in Appendix 1. We have brought that before, and this is just to finalise the paper.
Yeah. Are there any questions? Right, I didn't expect any, because as you quite rightly said, we did see them before and we put our comments in before. So we're on to the next part of the report then, which is so the savings. Sorry, you didn't mention anything specific on the capital.
Sorry, the next two papers are Treasury Management and then the Capital Investment and Disposal Strategy.
Oh, sorry, I've got my briefing note the wrong way around, I think. Or I've just done discretionary charges and just bear with me a second, please. Yeah, I've got those actually. Yes, I have discretionary charges. So I do apologise. I've obviously got my note the wrong way around. So the Treasury Management Strategy. Sorry, Sam.
It's okay. So the Treasury Management Strategy is the strategy for how the Council outlines and will meet its requirements against legislation, the code of practice and guidance that form the prudential framework. And the purpose of the strategy is to have management for investments, ensure borrowing is affordable, and manages and controls the risk for the Council, manages and controls the Council's cash flow, ensures that borrowing is achieved at best value rates, and investments are made with regard to security over return. And then the main part of the strategy includes the details on how the underlying borrowing requirements increases and how that can be managed, our expectations surrounding interest rates and investments that are being reviewed in light of the current low interest rates, and how we can make the correct returns based on our security. Any questions?
Any questions? No, well, a well-written report, and again, very interested to see how well you actually manage our treasury function.
Chair, can I just you have missed an item on the agenda. There was an item 10 about fees and charges for planning.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
So after the fees and charges report.
Oh, yes. Sorry, yeah. Well, that's okay. Do you want to go back to that one then?
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chair. Is it okay? I can make a comment at a convenient time.
On what? Sorry.
Well, it's with regards to the interaction before with Councillor O'Rourke. I need to apologise while it's a public record.
If you feel you need to do so, yes.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Well, I've been made aware. I was actually invited. I did actually a colleague of mine did actually cancel the meeting with Councillor O'Rourke, so I was wrong in my assertion that it hadn't been cancelled.
Well, thank you for saying that, and that is appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, and a meeting is being arranged with myself and Councillor O'Rourke and Councillor Iftikhar Ahmed.
Even better. These things happen.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Sam.
Do you want me to pick it up, Sam?
Yes, please, Mark.
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. It's Mark Robinson here. Hi.
Yeah, Mark.
Very briefly, obviously this follows on from the report that Sam's just presented to you. This is a specific one relative to the planning service and the discretionary charges that apply, particularly around those for pre-application advice. And I noted earlier that that the committee, when it considered the savings proposals last time, did did note that there was a saving attributed to planning income, which is which is essentially the detail of the report that's now before you. So this really just confirms how the service intends to realise that £30,000 saving from these types of services. We currently budget to achieve around 100,000 from discretionary charges, namely this preliminary advice. So what we're proposing now is to increase that by a further 30,000. As I've said in the report, I don't feel that this particularly raises concerns with me around our ability to do that, or that it will dissuade developers, particularly the big developers, from engaging with the service. So I'm reasonably confident. As Julie mentioned earlier, we have to be cautious with the economy, but we do have a strong pipeline of investment projects within the borough at the moment, and for that reason, I'm reasonably confident that this is something that the service can deliver over the next 12 months. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, but essentially this will concentrate, the charges will increase for those bigger development projects in the borough, and I'm confident that developers will continue to want to engage with the service for that.
Well, it's always good to hear that we're getting more income coming into the council. Are there any questions, Mark? No, and I've got no questions, Mark, so I think we can just note your report. So we're now on to capital investment disposal strategy, and back to you, Sam.
Thank you. So the capital investment and disposal strategy is a strategy that looks over the medium term and is reviewed each year. So this year the Cabinet are asked to approve and recommend the council the strategy and the report. And the purpose of the strategy, which is in Appendix 1, is to overview the plans for capital investment in disposals throughout the current programme and look at asset management planning. It gives the framework for governance for approval, how to monitor capital expenditure within the programme, and also looks at how the planned capital expenditure should be phased and how projects should be funded with the debt repayment and costs included. It has an overall approach to property investment, including the risk appetite and proportionality for investment, especially within the borough. And it also I've lost a page. And it also looks at, in Appendix 1 and 2 of the actual strategy, the programme again and details of some of the projects involved. Again, mainly based on investment in the borough, and includes some additional funds for operational projects this year, one being the crematorium improvements.
Are there any questions? I've got a couple of questions. One is that if you look at the investment in, is this part of the report, which actually does cover the normal capital investments as well, Sam? It's all the investments, isn't it? Capital.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. Just to make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. If you look at the investment in highways, other than, if you like, the routine spend that we have, which is ring fence money from government, all of the great expenditure we spent over the last couple of years seems to end after next year. Is that intentional, or is it just there may be a possibility for more, if you like, revenue to come through for spending on highways in the future?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think it's certainly not an oversight. When we were looking at the budget gap and ways to fund that, one of the decisions that was took quite early on was not to invite additional capital schemes. So the only new schemes that really came into the programme was invest to save schemes, and those schemes that we needed for operational delivery, like the cremators at the crematorium. It doesn't mean that the investment in the highways wouldn't be reconsidered for future budgets. It's just the fact, to balance this budget, it wasn't something that we've included.
Okay. Not really for the budget, but just to be getting noted in the minutes. I'm reading through the report and I'm thinking now more about the commercial investments and how these are scrutinised. And there is reference in the documents to scrutiny by both this committee and the CRE committee. And I just think we just need to get our, probably for next year's planning for overland scrutiny, just to get a framework in place for scrutinising these reports. I'm not sure what has happened over this last year. And because going forward, with the money's being projected to be expended, the profile becomes higher. And of course, we're all aware of how the high street's changing, both in terms of demand for offices, retail space, etc. So, as I say, I don't want to discuss it now because it's more about governance rather than about the budget. But I just want to get into the minutes so that it goes onto the agenda for next year's plan.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'll pick that up with colleagues for the work programmes for next year.
Please, yeah, and of course it will potentially affect two overland scrutiny committees. The next one, I've probably got a bee in my bonnet here, but there's quite a large investment on a solar farm. It's on, I think, page 44. I think it's on. Well, it can't be 44. It's a different page. Are we happy? I don't know who's sure to answer this question. Are we happy that we'll get the right sort of level of return on a solar farm in Rochdale? Bearing in mind, if you like, we are quite a cloudy place, and it's not exactly in the middle of a desert or something. And I just wonder if that particular plan has been properly assessed. Now, if there's nobody here to answer that question, I'm more than happy to have that come back to me as a specific point.
Chair Mark Robinson can answer.
Through you, Chair, it will refer to the scheme at Chamber House Farm in Haywood. Now, several years ago, when the council had a sustainability projects team at the time, there was some feasibility work undertaken, and this was actually identified as the best location. So I do take your point about the weather, but there was a degree of work undertaken. At that time, it was deemed to be viable. What happened, as you may recall, Councillor, is we actually got planning permission for it, and the day before we were about to start on site, the feed-in tariff changed, and the scheme became unviable as a result of that. Now things have moved on considerably since then. Technology, the efficiency of the technology, and this is part of a wider Greater Manchester pilot scheme. So there has been more detailed diligence work undertaken by the combined authority and colleagues around that. It is subject to a sizable grant coming in ironically from the European funding for the project, and it is the biggest project within GM actually. So we are getting the biggest share of that particular pot. So whilst there's a considerable outlay, the reality is it's being matched with other contributions, and all the diligence work suggests that it is a viable project, Chair.
That's great, Mark. That was my point. And I don't understand the technicalities behind it, but I know on a very trite level, when I look at getting panels on my roof, the economics didn't work out basically. So it's because of the weather we've got here. But if a feasibility has been done, appraisal has been done properly, then that's good news. And obviously, yeah. Any more questions on capital? Right, so then anything else you want to say, Sam, or are we then on to the next part, which is the savings program?
Yeah, it's savings. Yeah.
Right, now on this one, part of the papers are private as such. So I think you're going to presumably just give us an overview. And then if members want to have questions on the private section, we need to go private. And is that right, Alison? I don't need to say anything else extra.
Chair, yeah, you've got your public report that Sam will go through.
Yeah.
Obviously, questions on that can be public, but if there's any questions on the private agenda, then that needs to be saved for the private session when the YouTube stream has stopped.
Right. Okay. And for the avoidance of doubt, that starts on page. What page to start on? Page
Private 332. The private papers start.
Right. That's great. Okay. Thank you for that. Cheers. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so this paper is a report that provides an update of the savings proposals post consultation. So Cabinet will be asked to note the outcome of the consultation, which is detailed in section 4.2, and then also in the private part of the report. And officers are recommending to Cabinet that the proposals that went out to public consultation are taken forward to full budget council. And the comments from your previous meeting are detailed in section 4.2. So the proposals that we're proposing to go forward are the changes to the adult care charging policy, the review of the neighbourhood cohesion and community centre engagement officer, and the review of the town centre enforcement warden posts. Any questions?
Any general questions without going into the detail that's in the private papers? Okay, that's fine. So on the private papers, then I don't know how you want to play this, Sam.